Derek Overstreet, founder of the New Millennium Group. We're a financial planning firm. We have advisors standing by right now to take your call. 888-999-6370. The reason you're going to want to call is we're going to help you retire 3 to 5 years before you thought possible. The way we do this is by putting together a step-by-step plan. So if you're one of those people listening and you'd like a plan in writing, give us a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370, or go to utahsfinancialplanner.com.
Some of the most meaningful jewelry you own isn't new. It's inherited. A ring from a grandmother, a necklace full of memories, but no longer your style. Duke's Jewelers reimagines family heirlooms into custom pieces you'll actually wear and love. Working one-on-one, Duke's designers honor the original story while creating something fresh and modern. Don't let meaningful jewelry sit unused. Let it live on beautifully. Visit Duke's Jewelers in Springville or online at dukesjewelers.com, where old stories become new treasures.
Andy Bailey writes about the NBA for Bleacher Report, one of our favorite guests that we have on to talk about the association. Andy, how you doing, man?
I am doing pretty well. I appreciate you having me.
All right, so Andy, when you I don't think we've had a chance to chat about the NBA coming down on the Utah Jazz. Is it in regards to how the Jazz did it as opposed to the fact that the Jazz are tanking and a lot of other teams are tanking?
At this point, I honestly don't know how you answer that question, because how they did it has now been repeated multiple times by several different teams. There was even a couple instances of it happening before the Jazz did it. I don't remember who exactly posted it, but people had screenshots or whatever of rotations that other teams had done before the $500,000 fine. Maybe they were just the unlucky name that Adam Silver drew out of a hat to say, we need to make an example of somebody. And they did, obviously, but it wasn't a striking enough example, because all of these teams are continuing to act in their best interest, which I have said from the outset, it's obvious why these teams are doing it. It is in their best interest. And frankly, I can't fault them for doing so. And some years are going to have more tanking than others. It's been the case for decades in the NBA. So the whole thing just kind of stunk to me.
Yeah.
It never made a lot of sense, and it makes less sense now than it did weeks or months ago, whenever it happened.
Are there any of the proposed plans from Adam Silver that you look at like, okay, I can get along with that?
No. Another thing that I assume that the league somebody probably leaked that to Shams to gauge some reaction, and I think it was pretty poor throughout. And I'm with the masses on this one. I didn't love any of those ideas. I think doubling down on flattening the lottery odds is almost crazy to me. I understood the idea of flattening the odds before they did this last one, and I was actually kind of encouraged by it. I thought that could help. It's clearly had the opposite effect of what they intended. I think most people would agree that there was at least less discussion of this under the old lottery odds. And I think if you expand the pool of teams that can have a shot at the number one pick, more teams are going to take that shot. Yeah. Somebody joked about it right after they leaked those three ideas. Said something like Adam Silver is going to be the first commissioner that has teams tanking out of the playoffs. Because if you're like a 7 or 8 seed and you know you're just going to get rocked in the first round anyway, why even try? Why not enter that race and try to get the top pick? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think they should go back to the way it was immediately before they flattened the lottery odds, and that system was generally fine, I thought.
I don't know how much college ball you've watched. Obviously, we're here in Utah, so we've seen A.J. DeBonsa a bunch. I was at the NCAA tournament in San Diego, so I watched a couple games of Darren Peterson, and obviously the skill set's ridiculous, and I think he's probably at 75% health-wise. Body language was a little interesting, but I don't want to judge based on the 1 or 2 games that I saw from him there. But overall, could this very well be a 2003-like NBA draft? Or is it obviously too soon and too silly to talk about that right now?
Neither too soon nor too silly. this is the reason all these teams are tanking, is this draft has the potential to be a really, really good one. And you mentioned two of the guys at the top that I think have intrigued a lot of teams. It seems like a lot of people are kind of their support for Cam Boozer's candidacy at number one is kind of waning, but he's another guy that's super interesting. Darius Acuff has come on real strong in the last couple of weeks or months. Several guys who could potentially be franchise changers, starting with that top three, I think. And I'm, like you said, I don't pay a ton of attention to college and the draft. I kind of do my cramming for that in the weeks and probably 3 or 4 weeks before the draft. But I like all three of those guys for different reasons. I think I would go with Debonsa, number one, Debonsa. He checks, I think, the most boxes. He doesn't. So for a stats guy like me, last time I checked, he wasn't the leader in some of those categories that I like to look at for draft prospects. And I think Boozer and Peterson were both above him. But I still like him better because I think there's a competitive edge to him. I think the trend of the NBA to have these multi-positional wing / forward guys who can do a little bit of everything favors him. And frankly, there's more about the other two guys that I'd be nervous about than there is with Debonsa. There's the body language stuff that you mentioned with Peterson. I think we have a lot of examples of that not just going away when a player gets to the NBA. And then I think some of the concerns about Boozer are a little overblown, considering who the best player in the world has been for the last 5 or 6 years. I think with skill, you can overcome maybe a slight deficiency in lateral quickness and stuff like that. But it's still a thing that you can at least bring up. And I think there's just less concerns with Debonsa.
Andy Bailey, kind enough to join us right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I don't want to put tweets in your mouth, but I believe you tweeted out something about this last night. And I was thinking the same thing watching the Jazz and the Nuggets. Jazz obviously not interested in winning games, but taking and putting a little bit of a scare into Denver. How concerned would you be if you're a Nuggets fan going into postseason?
And that wasn't just last night either.
Yeah.
I think the same thing happened it was even closer the game before in Denver. I would be very concerned as a Nuggets fan about their defense. I think it's a lot more difficult to flip a switch in the playoffs than the Nuggets seem to think it is, even though they've kind of been burdened by this the last couple of years. There's just sort of a general malaise or lackadaisical approach to defense with them a lot. It doesn't happen as often when they're in marquee matchups. So maybe that's what you cling to for the playoffs. You think they're definitely going to be more engaged in the playoffs. And I think that's true. But part of the reason for the regular season, at least to me, is to establish habits and culture and things like that leading into the playoffs. And I think it's kind of hard to go from we care about defense 60% of the time to 100% of the time, just like I said, like at the flip of a switch. So I think there's major concerns. Their offense is fantastic. One thing I looked up this morning when I was just kind of skimming MVP discussion, it doesn't matter who's on the floor with Jokic. They're going to score at a very, very high level. But you got to have at least like an average to above average defense to be real successful in the playoffs, and they just don't have that right now.
We were talking to Danny Ainge on the show yesterday, and I asked him, are there things that, because obviously you anticipate this time of year with the opportunities available to Ace Bailey and Cody Williams that these guys are going to score because, the other night Cody Williams had 22 attempts. He's not going to get 22 attempts when everybody's healthy and the cavalry comes back next year. So are these guys just scoring because somebody has to score, or are they developing the way that they should throughout the course of the season and taking advantage of those opportunities based on a developed skill set and on the trajectory that they need to be at? Where are you at on, first, let's talk about Ace Bailey. Are you happy with his trajectory at this point in his rookie season? And then let's throw in Cody Williams and get your thoughts on him.
To your first point, I think it's a little bit of both. I think there is, because so many guys are out, people just have to fill the vacuum of production. And a lot of guys have done that. But I also think that some of these players have gotten better over the course of the season. And you don't necessarily have to throw these performances away. I think I was just writing the power rankings this morning and focused on Kyle Filipowski, he's going to have a hard time on the floor if everybody's available next season, but he was awesome for a week, for this past week for the Jazz. So I think you can see glimpses of talent from all these guys, even in this window of the season. There are obvious caveats that you attach to February, March, and April basketball, but still some good things that a lot of these guys have shown. And I think that's true of Cody Williams, a guy who, frankly, I'd kind of counted out earlier this year. His statistical markers for the first couple of years of his career were so bad that it's like his company for career numbers is guys who last 2 or 3 years. And so I figured that might be what happens to Cody Williams too. But he's life here in the last few weeks or month or so. Looks kind of like the 3-and-D player that they thought they were going to get. So that's super interesting. And then Ace Bailey, I think, has gotten better over the course of the season, but pretty much from the start. Like I feel like I can go all the way back to the season. He's looked a little bit better than I expected him to. I thought there was going to be the potential of him to be kind of a ball stopper, a guy who would pound the ball, a guy who wanted to do more on the ball stuff than off the ball stuff. And I think his off ball game is just way further ahead to be. And I think he has, I think he's closer to the star trajectory that people thought he had before his college season than maybe what they thought he had right before the draft.
Every time now teams are playing Oklahoma City, it seems like the coach seems like they're pointing out Shea and the tight whistle that he's getting. Are those complaints warranted? And where do you stand on him and his MVP race?
I sold my car in Carvana last night.
Well, that's cool.
No, you don't understand. It went perfectly. Real offer, down to the penny. They're picking it up tomorrow. Nothing went wrong.
So, what's the problem?
That is the problem. Nothing in my life goes as smoothly. I'm waiting for the catch.
Maybe there's no catch.
That's exactly what a catch would want me to think.
Wow, you need to relax.
I need to knock on wood. Do we have wood? Is this table wood?
I think it's laminate.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's close enough.
Car selling without a catch. Sell your car today on Carvana. Pickup fees may apply.
Springfest means more sun, more fun, and more free at Lowe's. Keep your yard in line with an additional free Ego 56-volt battery when you buy a select Ego mower, trimmer, or blower. Plus, keep landscaping fresh with Stay Green 1 cubic foot garden soil, 5 bags for $10. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 4/8 while supplies last. Selection varies by location. Soil offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii.
So I think the complaints are definitely warranted, and it's not necessarily just the foul calls that Shea gets. That's obviously a big part of it, but I think it's when you compare the calls that Shea gets to the stuff that the defense gets away with in OKC. The way that they're allowed to defend it's just different than every other team in the league. And I think 29 coaching staffs and 29 fan bases see it. Every time they play, guys like Caruso and Dort and Cason Wallace are just so physical, so handsy, so grabby, and they get away with a lot of it. And then if you just barely clip SGA on one of those jumpers, he's going to sell it and he's going to get to the line. So I think it's when you look at the totality of the game, it's hard to see that they're not officiated differently than the rest of the league. Now that I don't think there's some grand conspiracy on the part of the NBA or the referees to make life easier for the Thunder. I think this is something that's been true in basketball basically at all levels for a long time. Once you establish yourself as a plus defender or a plus defensive team, you just get a little bit more leeway from the officials. There's lots of examples through NBA history. Tony Allen, Bruce Bowen. There's just a lot of those guys over the course of history, and it kind of applies to the whole team in the Thunder's case. So yeah, I do think that there is something to the complaints. If I was a coach, I'd probably be pulling my hair out in those post-game press conferences after playing OKC, so I don't blame him for complaining. I don't really knock SGA or his MVP candidacy because of it. The way that I look at the MVP race typically is what has actually been produced. And his production is unbelievable. part of the reason he's so productive is he's able to maximize these rule advantages that he has, but he's working within the rules as they are right now. So if I had a vote, I would be very torn between him and Jokic. All the momentum is with Wembanyama and Doncic right now, and I get it. I think they have pretty solid cases, but to me, they're still a tier below SGA and Jokic. I would sit and stare at their numbers, basic and advanced, for a long time if I had a vote, because I think you could reasonably go with either one of those guys.
So right now, you're kind of 50-50 on both those guys?
At the moment, I might be like 51-49 Jokic.
Okay.
Which is kind of interesting because all season I kind of would check in every couple of months and just kind of do my own homework on the debate and see where I was. And in every checkpoint, I've gone SGA, and I've put it out there publicly. I think some of that general malaise and lackadaisic approach that we talked about with Denver earlier, I do think Jokic deserves some of the blame for that. He takes some of the responsibility. But then I look at the numbers and including the impact stuff, which at least ostensibly takes in his effect on the team's intensity or whatever. And his numbers are just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And I looked at those pretty closely this morning, and I thought, geez, it probably still is Jokic, who's the single most valuable guy. The way that he impacts every aspect of the game, particularly on offense, I just don't think anybody does it to the same degree that he does. I will also say, though, somebody posted a screenshot from the 60s to counter my argument, and they may have some argument of their own, but I think this might be the best 4-player MVP race ever. The numbers of all 4 of these guys are just crazy.
Yeah.
Jokic, SGA, Doncic, and Wemby. And it's not like you could draw your battle lines and go to the camp of any of those guys and be pretty confident in your case. I've never seen anything like it in all the years I've been doing this.
So circling back to the Jazz before we let you go, assuming the Jazz pick somewhere between 5 and 8, throw in your whatever guy in that range there. And I know neither one of us are really knee deep in the draft right now, but assuming that Ace Bailey continues on his trajectory, assuming Walker Kessler's back next year, is this a playoff team? Not just a play-in team, but are they a playoff team next year?
I would hesitate to guarantee playoffs. I think there may be another year or two of development to be done. Play-in is certainly in the mix. And even in the first couple of years of this post-Gobert Mitchell era, there were some numbers that said when Markkanen and Kessler are on the floor, this is a pretty good team. So if they can keep those two guys upright and you add Triple J to the mix, Ace Bailey takes a step forward, maybe they exceed my expectations. The problem is they're in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
And although the East was better this year, I still think it's tougher to be in the West, and a lot of the best players are in the West. And so to go from the bottom to the top 6 is a pretty significant leap. I do think top 10 is within reach, but a top 6 guaranteed playoff spot, that's a harder prediction. Of course, you could win the play-in and still get in, but I would see them probably in like the 8, 9, 10 range.
All right, so I'm having Lloyd produce a little bit on the side. Hey, Lloyd, do you have a Tony Jones cut? You know Tony, longtime Jazz beat writer, now with The Athletic and based out of Philadelphia. We had him on the air the other day, and he made a bold prediction. And look, we know Tony's he talks a lot on Twitter, and I love him. He's one of my favorite dudes on the planet, but the dude does not shy away from making opinions. But even this one had me a little bit like, ooh, you sure you want to do that, Tony? Lloyd's going to pull it up for you right now, but essentially gave a prediction of what the Jazz are going to look like if, in fact, they get the number 1 overall pick, if they're able to get A.J. DeBonsa, and what this team will look like in building the team with Ace Bailey continuing on his growth, with Lauri Markkanen, with Walker Kessler, and this whole group, and what they could build together if, in fact, that they're able to grab A.J. DeBonsa. And essentially he said that they will win a championship, not just an NBA Finals, not a deep playoff run. They will win an NBA title in 3 years.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to play it for you so you know I'm not misquoting him. Here is Tony Jones with that.
Listen, you ready for me to get wild on here?
Well, let's go.
I'm going to get
Let's
wild on this show.
Let's do it.
If the Utah Jazz get AJ DeBanza, they're winning an NBA championship within 3 years.
There you go.
That is wild.
That's Tony being Tony a little bit, but it's always entertaining. There's no doubt.
Yeah. Very confident, very bold. I don't think I can back him in that prediction. However, somebody brought this up recently, and I hadn't really thought of it since Ainge first showed up for the Jazz. But maybe you have hints of that same blueprint that he had in Boston with Tatum and Brown, two big forwards who do a lot of different stuff, and maybe you have that in Ace Bailey and AJ DeBanza. I don't know how. It was probably 5 or 6 years before Tatum and Brown finally broke through, so it would be the Ainge timeline sped up. But yeah, Tony, that's pretty bold if you hear this.
That's why we love Tony. Hey, we appreciate it, Andy. Thanks for hanging out with us, man. We'll do it again soon. Appreciate you dialing up on the YouTube channel as well, so everybody can see what's going on. Life treating you good there in Wyoming?
Life's great. We had a very weird, warm winter, so that was nice. Lots of wind, unfortunately, but that kind of comes with the territory in Wyoming.
I made my annual pilgrimage out there in February for a Utah State basketball game, and I've seen some crazy things on I-80, and that was the easiest drive to Laramie in the middle of February that I've ever made. So I don't anticipate that's ever going to happen again.
No, neither would I. It was like we were living in a different climate for a little bit.
Yeah, no doubt. Hey, thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Andy Bailey, Bleacher Report, right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Mom, can you tell me a story?
Sure. Once upon a time, a mom needed a new car.
Was she brave?
She was tired, mostly. But she went to Carvana.com and found a great car at a great price. No secret treasure map required.
Did she have to fight a dragon?
Nope. She bought it 100% online. From her bed, actually.
Was it scary?
Honey, it was as unscary as car buying could be.
Did the car have a sunroof?
It did, actually.
Okay, good story.
Car buying you'll want to tell stories about. Buy your car today on
Carvana.
Delivery fees may apply.